1.0 version of the D&D House that I've been working on. This is just a quick tutorial just for the baseline, so when we either have new players or there's new updates, um, you can guys watch this. That way just with some of the stuff it'll be easier to understand because there's a lot, and unfortunately with the holotapes, which are like the tutorial tapes that they have in the game, you can only record for about 10 seconds, so it is not very effective, at least for now, until I can figure out more about it. But with that being said, yeah, let's get started. So this is what you see when you first spawn into the map. It's pretty basic. It has a template house with simple grass surrounded around. Just be careful if you're going to be running around, because if you jump off this, you will fall into the void and you will have to respawn. So you just want to be careful. That's why this little green fence area is here. Um, this is what you see when you walk into the house. The doors open automatically. So it's pretty, like I said, basic. Most of this is just for visual aid. For me personally, as a DM, I'm not saying for other people if they are being DM, but this is just for me. Most of the stuff I use for being the Dungeon Master, it's mostly on my laptop. This is more for visual aid. So when we're doing like maps and stuff like this, for example, along with over here we have the character pieces. And I'll be going through currently what is the room right now, so we can go over it. So to our left here, this will be the main game table. This is the table that where all the players will be playing at. On this side is where the players will be at the moment. I'm having it where it's only 3 players and 1 DM. So how that would work is either the 3 players are on this side, or 1 player is on this side, 1 player is on this side, or 1 player is on this side, whatever they prefer. In the future, if we have more players, then that is subject to change. Just at the moment, I'm keeping it only at 3 players with 1 DM. So with the players, what will happen is first you're going to choose your challenger, which means choose your game piece. Unfortunately, there isn't a lot of pieces in the video game right now. I need to try to find more, or I need to try to do some research to figure out how to make my own, because these are the only ones I found that have a base, this green base right here, that allow it to stand up. The other ones I found do not. They have either that piece, but they keep falling over, or they do not have that piece at all. And that piece helps with moving so much from here to the board and stuff like that. So after you choose your piece, you're going to pick it up. The reason why they're facing this way is because when you pick up a piece like this, it faces the way you're looking at. So for example, if you chose the chest piece, you would pick it up like this, and it will look where you're looking at. Then you go to the board, and you just press for Xbox X to place it down like that. And you don't have to worry about, you could put it right here or anywhere as long as it's around here and not all across the board. You don't really have to worry about where you're placing it though, unless we are in a combat mode, in which then that is where the board will change and you will decide where you want to put your piece. So with that, that's just an example. So we will put that piece back. What players are also able to do is they are free to grab one of these. These are for notes. You pick this up and then you can place it anywhere in the game. And then once you have it, you can pick up one of these markers and you can draw on it. And what this is for is this is just for notes. If you want to keep track of like your AC, which is your armor rating, if you want to keep track of your max health, if you want, you're also able to, if you want to do stuff on the sly without other players knowing. For example, if you want to rob someone, if you want to do something sneaky without the other players knowing, you are also free to write out your notes there and then hand me the note. If you do go that route, I would say just be careful, because depending on where you're sitting, they are may be able to see it. So because I know currently for the people who are going to play, because I know them in real life and I have their numbers, I would say text me instead, or if you want, go ahead and pass a note, whichever you prefer. I'm trying to put that back. There we go. And with that being, did not mean to do that. Please, if you're a player, do not draw on the board. This is more for me, just so I can draw a map. So we can talk about that a bit. Let me put that back up there. So this is an example, and I will grab a marker to get a better view. This is an example of a dungeon. In this example, the party has been eaten by this demon, and they have to escape through his foot. And how, for me as a DM, how I'm going to do it is over here. This will give an example. These are the marker hints, meaning what it will be like on the board. So the purple is the area explored, meaning first off, as the players are progressing, they're not going to see, for example, if they're in this dungeon, they're not going to see this full map. I'm going to be drawing it out as they progress. Let me get out of that and then go this way so I can see better. So, for example, if the players are just starting, I would only draw this part and then this part right here so they can see they can either go this way, or that way. And whatever way they choose, then I will continue to draw out. So, like how what is the word I'm looking for? The wall. There we go. The wall was saying purple is that line where you explored, meaning if the players are right here, then I would sketch out like this, showing that they've gone that way. And then let's say they go this way, then I would do the same thing, doing that just to show that is where they've gone, so that way they can keep track of where they've been and where they haven't been. So that is what the purple is for. Next is the blue. The blue is the outline, which essentially just means that is just the outline of the dungeon, of the area of where you are. Essentially, that is to help you keep track of, okay, this is where I'm able to go, this is where I've been, this is essentially the whole map, just so you're not confused, like, oh, what's over here, what's over there. And then next is red, is either traps or enemies. So let me pick up red real quick right here, just to go up here. So red is traps or enemies, meaning let's say the crew was going down this way, then if they were quiet, then they could see that there was a trap or an enemy hanging out right there. If they're rushing through, the enemy could be alerted. Or let's say, for example, this way, if they were walking down this way, when they got to here, that's when they would notice the enemy. But if they're right here, they would have to have specific traits, perks, or something else where they could hear the enemy almost. So that's essentially what the red is supposed to signify. Next is the green. Green is my loot piles, meaning what that is essentially that could be anything from they find chests or they find trash that they could loot through. Sometimes it's even other examples of loot, such as like they could find a campfire or something else that essentially helps them get items, and that is what that is supposed to signify. And finally, the blue X, that is just the exit, which essentially is just, let me pick up the marker here. That is essentially just the exit out of the dungeon. Once they get to this point, they have the choice to leave the dungeon and continue on through their journey. However, once they leave, they cannot come back. This place will no longer be able to be gone to unless it's under specific occasions or specific reasons. Most of the time, for me, just so it's easier, usually I say that after they clear the dungeon, they're not able to go to it because of certain reasons, such as it collapses or something happens when they're not able to go there. So with this, as a visual aid, now people will be able to essentially make sure they've been everywhere before they leave. And I think what I want to do is that I'm going to be drawing them out all the way, and then once you've been everywhere, I will let you know that it has been 100% completed. I am not sure on that. I think that'll be changing depending on who I play at or who I play with, because some people I've played 2 to 3 games with, some people I've only played 1. So I think that's going to change depending on who's in the game and who's more experienced. So moving on, we are going to discuss this. This is the timer for certain events. So for example, if a crew has someone, let's say they're under a true spell, for example, then the timer will be put where they have to decide what questions they have to ask. Another example could be like, oh, there's an enemy ahead. What will they do to the enemy? So let's say, for example, I don't want to show that board yet just because we're going to discuss it in a bit. Let's say, for example, and let me see if I can pull up the pointer right there. Let's say, for example, the crew is right here, and they're going this way when someone spots an enemy. Now, when they spot the enemy, that is when I'll say, you have spotted the enemy, you now have 60 seconds to decide what to do. Now, the crew and the team has to decide what they're going to do now that they spotted the enemy. If they cannot decide what to do in the 60 seconds, the enemy will then be alerted to their presence, unless under specific reasons such as the person has, let's say they're invisible, or let's say they sent a decoy out or something like that. In the certain situations such as those, then the rules will change, and instead of the enemy automatically being able to locate them, they will instead roll for it. Rolling will be d20, and depending on what they roll, you could be alerted or not alerted, or the enemy could be alerted to your presence or not, depending on different stats and stuff, and that would change per game, per player. And finally, let's go to the DM side. So this is what the DM will be seeing. So these are extra pieces that I was talking about before. Pieces just like these that are able to stand up on their own. Because there's only a certain amount of pieces, and because with every room, and I can show you right here, every room is made out of this ink, and you only have a certain amount of ink you're able to use. Once you reach the max, you cannot make any more items unless you start deleting them. So how it will be, in order to save ink so we can continue making more campaigns and more different stuff like that, is that we will be using these three pieces alone, and how we will be doing is that they will be cloned or duplicated in order to be added to the game. So, for example, we'll go over them real quick. This is NPCs. These are how for me as a DM, will every NPC be looking like, but I'll describe them differently depending on who they are. This one is to represent the bosses, and this one is to represent minions. Minions essentially are any creatures that aren't like a final boss almost, so they're just all the enemies. So, for example, there could be an NPC out, but if you make that person angry or you start a fight with them, then this piece will come out to replace them, and they will turn into essentially a minion, which means that they're going to turn into an enemy to fight. So how it will be happening is that all the pieces can be cloned, just as that, and then the piece will then be moved onto the board, like that. They'll be slid out, just like that. And then the same rule can apply to the minions. These are just frozen just so I didn't actually pick them up as I was moving stuff, so I'll give you an example. We will clone this, move it to right there, and then click move, and then it will slide out. Oop, that is for the up. It will slide out. If I can grab that piece. Oh, I see the problem. Let me click. There we go. Just like that. I was reading that wrong. So that's how it will be added into. And the same rule can apply, let's say if there's multiple ones. So let's say there's more than one. I like that, just like that, and then they will be moved like so. And this is just in this way, just so the players can get a almost better perspective, because they'll be on this side. That way it's not just a click and drag. And this way it is still in that same mechanic, but it will look a little better. And then let me just delete these. And there we go. And then these red tabs are red text are supposed to just give the DM just a helpful hint, just to show what each of them are supposed to represent. And then this board right here is just to hide it. That way players aren't confused, or trying to figure out which ones are popping out. And finally, let's go to this part right here. So these are supposed to represent every player. I put 4 just in case that we end up having 4 players and 1 DM. Because usually it's either 3 players and 1 DM or 4 players. So I just put that just in case. How it's supposed to be done is that it will show the player, meaning that once a campaign is started, these will be changed. So, for example, let me go into configure. So I'll modify it. So how it's going to be read, it's going to be the player's name, meaning their real life name, so I can know who is using that piece. Excuse me. The next line will be the character piece name. This one is chess, and that's supposed to represent this piece right here, which is the mimic chest. This is just to help me so I know who is using that piece and what that piece is. And then finally is the AC, and that is supposed to be so I can know when I'm playing as DM, I don't have to always ask, oh, what's your AC to know if it hits or not. This is just a simple aid so I can always keep track of what the AC is and then what their each piece is, because each piece can't have a name tag, but this way I'll be able to keep track. And of course, in real life, D&D isn't that way with pieces having name tags, but just as for me, because I have bad memory, it definitely does help. And so far, with that being said, that is pretty much everything. These are just my markers and eraser, just so if I'm writing my own notes of my own, then I can write stuff down, along with making out the map and everything. And then you have these as well, like I said, for your notes here. And with that being said, that is everything currently for the current map. I plan to add future updates depending on how my classes go, because with this you definitely have to do a lot of different coding. Like for example, you have to use these pieces instead of actual code. All these pieces are made and required just to make a simple timer that goes on and off that doesn't even have a sound. So it definitely is a lot more complex than I imagined, but I do plan to add future updates. And with that being said, that is everything for the D&D House 1.0. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know, and I'll try to answer them to the best of my knowledge. And yeah, that's everything.